fraud. They are going to lose. Is this why they are panicking? And governors are out saying they're going to protect their protesters, which are really terrorists. Is this why why are they panicking now? It seems like there's a much higher level of panic in the Democratic Party. Why?
Well, they know if Trump wins and the illegals are deported, the Democrats are going to lose. Or if we go to only citizens vote, if we go to eliminating the machines from the elections, the Democrats lose everything. If the Democrats can't steal elections, they lose power. They lose power, they lose money. And the Democrats cannot allow a fair election. So the Democrats know that Trump's coming after them. And they know that they can't defend themselves with a Barack Obama in office whose goal was to destroy America. I've been writing about this since I wrote Abomination in 2008 and warned people this guy was a Muslim communist. Raised a Muslim, he hated America, raised by Frank Marshall Davis, a communist, and that his allegiance was not to the United States of America. And the point is that the Democrats know that Donald Trump will take this general of the National Guard who says he's going to protect the protesters. He'll be arrested. They know that the governors will be arrested. They know that any of the law enforcement agents in Portland, Oregon, who don't cooperate with ICE, who refuse to come on 9/11 calls where ICE needs help, who are hiding illegal immigrants or doing anything to encourage illegal immigrants to escape. These people are committing crimes. This is no longer political action. This is criminal activity. And they know Donald Trump is going to tell Tom Homan, your job is not only to deport the illegals, but to bring criminal charges against all those who are taking affirmative actions to interfere with the activities of ICE in law enforcement.
I am stunned at, the mayor says he's going to have a special team to fight ICE in the streets. They should walk into his office and cuff him. They should take him in. Same thing with Pritzker. Same thing with Gavin Newsom. Same thing with the governor of Oregon. I mean, this is getting ugly, and now we know why it's getting ugly, because is this a fight to the death for the Democrats?
It is a fight to the death. And look, Donald Trump's putting the military now into increasing numbers of cities, which are democratically controlled. And so Donald Trump knows he's still got opposition within the Department of Justice, people blocking him. One I've been after particularly is this Todd Blanche, Blanche, who's he told Pam Bondi just to go home back to Miami and work out of her home office. She couldn't run an organization as big and as complex as the Department of Justice. He'd run it for her. Todd Blanche was one of Donald Trump's lawyers when he was being charged with all these bogus crimes in New York when he was out of office. And Todd Blanche said, well, he became a Republican and started making positive statements that encouraged Trump to be defended. And now he's in the Department of Justice, so he's blocking the release of Tina Peters. He's blocking any executive order coming down on forcing only citizens votes. He's not giving the J6ers any compensation. He's blocking prosecutions to protect Comey and to protect not Comey, but to protect Brennan, protect Trump, Susan Rice, all the real criminals.
Not Trump.
I mean, not Trump. Obama.
There you go.
Obama. And
So what is his name again? What is his name again? He's
Todd. Todd. Blanche. Blanche.
Todd Blanche. What is his position at the DOJ?
Deputy Attorney General.
Oh boy, howdy! And does Trump know he's doing this?
Well, after we've been broadcasting it and getting the word out, I'm sure Trump knows about it, and I'm sure Trump will take action. May not do it today, but I'm confident Trump will get the Department of Justice running properly. And I'm sure Donald Trump will be vigilant on this once he knows he's being blocked. There's a lot of people blocking Donald Trump's agenda from within the bureaucracy. I mean, my solution to the bureaucracy for a long time has been to move it to Death Valley, reassign its location, and give them Quonset huts and all the wind and solar they want. See how many will want to work for the government when they're not in their Georgetown coffee shop bubble. But
Um,
there's too
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go
well, there's
ahead.
just there's too many in the government resisting Trump. So this shutdown, I think, is very therapeutic right now. And I think Donald Trump should accelerate the number of employees that he's reducing by force. He might even close a couple of departments altogether. He's got great authority right now, and he ought to exercise it. I think he's begun to, even today. But to get to your key point here is that the Democrats have been committing crimes which are going to astonish the American people. Okay, so the Democrats, I go back to this book on neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy, maybe one of the more important books I've ever written, because what the Democrats did is in 2017, Obama and Biden made an agreement with the president of Honduras to open the border. President of Honduras happened to be a member of the Sinaloa drug cartel. And the promise was that they would open the border to child sex traffic and child organ harvesting. So 100,000 unaccompanied minors suddenly appear at the border and let to cross and disappear. And the money, which is enormous from child sex trade and child organ, much more money than you can make in drugs, goes into the banking system. And the CIA, who monitors all this, participates. The Border Patrol stands down. And now we get the drugs coming in through the drugs are coming in through the Sinaloa drug cartel, cocaine, and China's allowed to bring in fentanyl. It all goes through banks. All the money goes into the banks. And a whistleblower, Sean Taylor, who was a police chief or assistant police chief outside Nashville, did an investigation on this. And what he showed was the money went into the Democratic non-governmental organizations. And they took it out of the banks by mortgage fraud. Much more.
Oh, boy, how
Yeah,
complicated.
yeah. Well, it's complicated, but what it means is that so the woman who headed Act Blue would buy $1 million house in Palo Alto and get $50 million out in mortgage loans, which were recorded on LexisNexis, but never in the deed. That was money laundering. That money came from the border. That money came from drugs and abusing children. So the Democratic Party has funded itself and its NGOs, its treasonous NGOs, through activities which the American people will find abhorrent. Now, this is being investigated. I brought Sean Taylor's investigation into the FBI, and the FBI is investigating Act Blue. The FBI is investigating Christopher Warren. They're investigating treason. And if they're not blocked by people like Todd Blanche, we're going to get some very serious indictments. I think when this all unfolds, I'm doubtful the Democratic Party will continue to exist.
Wow. Martin Armstrong said that his computer said that the Democrat Party would just disappear, would go away.
I think it has. I don't think it has a legitimate reason to exist. I don't think it has any longer a preamble or a set of principles consistent with legal behavior and non-treasonous behavior. I think at its heart, it's become a treasonous party. When you get AOC and the others who are running the party, and the corruption is massive in Washington. I mean, Mitch McConnell also, his wife Elaine Chao, he made lots of money going to visiting China. Her family's rich in China. They wouldn't be alive if Mitch McConnell didn't do what China wanted done. It doesn't cost very much to buy a senator, maybe $50,000. And then they're constantly throwing, and have been doing it since Lyndon Johnson, sex and drug parties in Washington, D.C. for congressmen and lobbyists, etc. And they blackmail the representatives. How is it that Elizabeth Warren is worth some $60 million, or Nancy Pelosi? Any of these sitting senators and Congress representatives of Congress who are millionaires today but weren't when they entered office need to be investigated. Harry Truman said the only way to get rich in politics is if you're a crook, and he was right.
Wow. So let's get to the things that how are you going to stop the voter fraud for namely the 2026 midterm elections, which
Okay, well,
evidently they're going big and they're going bold on the 2026 elections. How is your group and your people stopping the election fraud, the voter fraud?
I think you're going to see increasingly action coming out of the White House. So this a week ago Friday, a judge in Wisconsin, a state judge, ruled that the Wisconsin elections, including the 2026 midterm, only citizens can vote. And you have to have proof of citizenship. And so, therefore, they're going to have to redo the voter rolls because they have been doing this motor voter. And Wisconsin admits to having, 300,000 or 400,000 non-citizens given driver's license that are automatically registered to vote. And so the entire state database is corrupted by algorithms and intentional seeding of illegal immigrants. Now that came also out of the White House because the voter integrity activists in Wisconsin have been working directly with the White House. And the White House will be preparing to release a lot more information here about the Dominion machines, about the communist Chinese intrusions into the election, the fact that our elections are not safe from foreign intrusion, not Russia, Russia, Russia. Intelligence reports that Obama got prior to the 2016 election were that Russia had not interfered in the election. Obama threw those out and said, go back and write them, even if it's a lie, write it that Russia did interfere with Trump. They had the Steele dossier. Those are treasonous activities. Okay, so the American public is going to get hearing more and more of this. And Donald Trump will issue a second executive order. One's being prepared in the White House. And it will say that you have to have voter IDs, proof of citizenship to vote. They're going to eliminate general mail-in voting, going back to the old absentee system, which was very tightly controlled, and get rid of the machines. Now, if Donald Trump can do this under Article 2 powers as commander-in-chief, and the military, which are now going in the states, if necessary, can run the 2026 election if the states refuse to follow the law. The law of the United States is that the states control the presidential election, but they control them only as long as they comply with federal rules and regulations. They can't defy federal rules and regulations.
Woo!
They can't commit.
You're making news here, buddy. So this 2026 is going to. So things are going to get hot in the election circles. That's what this. So that's what this rollout of the National Guard is to these big cities. Is that they want to stop the voter fraud in the background. They want to not just the violence, yes, but they want to stop. They're setting up to stop voter fraud.
They're setting up to make sure that our voters, who are legitimate voters, have their franchise rights returned. And if we lose our voting rights, we lose the republic. And so therefore, the fundamental things that keep America free and have 250 years are the First Amendment, freedom of speech, Second Amendment, right to bear arms, and third, the right to a legitimate citizen-only vote. And if we lose these things, we don't have a country. The mob, the satanic left, will take over, and that's where we'll go.
Boy, they must be. Go ahead.
No, we're at a point where this is now going to be contested, and when this gets contested, if necessary, Donald Trump can use the Insurrection Act, and no judge will have anything to say.
Ooh, so the Insurrection Act is big. So you think the Insurrection Act is coming before the election?
I don't think Donald Trump will use the Insurrection Act unless he has to. I think Donald Trump is very cognizant of what's going on, both within the bureaucracy and within the country. He understands that Antifa is a terrorist organization. He understands that Black Lives Matter has been funded by the communist Chinese through all this money laundering. I have a Department of Justice report that shows that, TD Bank for about 8 years, starting about 2014, just quit filing money laundering reports. And Department of Justice says they may have money laundered $10 trillion in money. $10 trillion. Now, where did that go? How much of that ended up in the Democratic Party? How much of that ended up in Washington, D.C.? How much of that ended in Antifa? How about Soros's money? Who funds Antifa? These people need to be investigated because they're funding terrorist organizations within the United States. The universities are supporting Hamas, which is sworn to destroy the state of Israel and kill Jews. Terrorist organization supported by Iran. Now, how can that be done with these universities getting tax deferral on their endowments? How can they violate federal law endorsing a terrorist organization and having the students protest over it, and that be the university in their guarded little privileged place in which they can support terrorism? The universities are not set up so that you can encourage, foster, and conduct crimes. And universities that do so are going to lose their funding. Obama made all student tuitions national program so he could flood the universities with money and therefore hire leftist professors who hated America. I left the universities myself in 2000, and I left in 1980. I found them getting too radical, and I couldn't be in universities. I left them in 1980 and decided these weren't the place for me. Unless you were a communist and didn't believe in God, it was tough to be a university professor, and by now it's almost impossible.
What can people expect to see, like with this Oregon, with this general? You think they'll come in and just cuff him and court-martial him? Is that right? With the Oregon general that said, in case you didn't know, folks, he just recently said that he was going to defy the president's order for National Guard. He was going to take his troops under his command out to defend Antifa. I kid you not, I can't make this up. This is in Oregon. So you think that this is why this is so radical? He's being told to do this, by the way. You think this is so radical because the Democrats feel like sand in an hourglass. They feel the sand, their power slipping through their hands. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. And Democrats know that their time is short because of, that the president's authority and ability to get this country back in order is only going to increase. American people support these efforts. And the polls are wrong that say the midterm election is going to be close. If the Democrats can't steal an election, half or more of the Democrats in office would be removed. And the next thing that will have to be addressed is this racial gerrymandering, which violates the equal protection clauses under the Constitution. And this Supreme Court will probably reverse race preferences in congressional districting. The Democrats will lose massive numbers of seats in the House and Senate, mostly in the House. But the problem is that right now, the Democrats are going to do everything they can to disrupt. But this is not 2020. You don't have General Milley as Joint Chiefs of Staff, along with a Secretary of Defense who said that they were going to support the rights of Antifa to protest. If this general thinks he can get away with that today, he's wrong. He'll be given a choice. He can maintain that position if he wants, and if he takes any action in that regard, he can be charged with insubordination, and he can be charged with supporting terrorism and serious criminal charges, and conceivably even treason.
You think he's being told to do this by the puppet masters of all these billionaires funding all this Antifa, all these NGOs, non-government organizations that are getting money? They had one thing where they said Elon Musk and other people are saying, 100 million at least has gone to non-government organizations from tax dollars. They cut off USAID, which was funding all kinds of crazy stuff with their magic money machine. And they were also giving money to media. You're right?
Yeah, well, communist China, through running the fentanyl on the border, can put billions of dollars in through the banks to money launder to wherever they want it to go. and they do it. I mean, I caught HSBC money laundering in 2011. I had a banker in Long Island, John Cruz, who said, Dr. Corsi, they're creating accounts from people who used to be in the bank, and they're running millions of dollars through these accounts and closing them. I called a gentleman in New York who was about 80 some years old and said, sir, this could be an unusual call, but is your social security number? And I read it to him, and he said, how'd you get that? I said, we'll get there in a minute, but did you run $4 million through your account in HSBC last week? So I closed that account years ago. I said, well, I've got a bunch, who's your lawyer? Because I've got a bunch of documents here, and HSBC ran $4 million through an account with your social security number on it last week. And Department of Homeland Security called me, sent a permanent investigating committee. I didn't want to be a whistleblower. I just handed over all my documents to them. HSBC got fined $1.9 billion and nobody went to jail.
Wow.
And the report, 500-page report approximately, written by the Senate Permanent Investigating Committee, detailing that HSBC was money laundering for the Mexican cartels. Now, you can't run a drug operation or child sex operation or child organ harvesting without a bank. I mean, what are you going to do? Take your $100 bills, put them in the back of a tractor trailer, and then when you want to buy your lunch, you pull up to a taco stand, open up the trailer, and take out a couple of $100 bills to buy your tacos. You got to get the money into a bank so you can use your credit cards. Banks participate. The banks and the intelligence agencies run the drug trade and the sex trade, including the child sex trade worldwide. And all of the intelligence agencies that I know of participate in it.
Wow. How are we going to stop this? I mean, I guess first work on the voter fraud. Can they stop this money going into these NGOs that they brought just at a White House meeting this past week? They have teams of people working on this. I guess first they have to fire some people at the Department of Justice. What's his name?
Todd Blanche
Todd Blanche
first.
has to be fired. But you think do you have sources? You must have sources in the White House, correct?
I've got lots of sources.
Okay. So your sources, you have good sources. You don't have to tell me your sources, but you have good sources saying, oh, this is a full court press. This isn't a small thing. This is a big thing. They're going after this.
The White House is going to go after. Donald Trump is much more effective as a leader this time than he was last time. He's learned about Washington. I mean, my principle in Washington is I say, if anybody's talking to you, they're lying. And so you just got to figure out why they're lying, what they want. And that's, I said in New York, which Donald Trump knows, the currency of New York is money. If you've got money, you've got power. And Washington is the other way around. Currency in Washington is power. If you've got power, you've got money. And so that's why the Congress is rich. They've got power, they get money.
I think it was Ilhan Omar, or I can't remember which one it was, but she had nothing, a $50,000 net worth or something. Then now one of them's worth $30 million in a year.
Yeah, Obama was living on his credit cards when he was in the Illinois Senate. His wife was angry at him always because he was overextended. And now he's got mansions all over the place, and he's worth who knows how many hundreds of millions. And how'd that happen?
How that happened? No kidding. All right, so
Harry Truman, by the way, take out a postage stamp out of his wallet. The letter was going to a personal friend, and put his own postage stamp on the letter. And when he retired, he went back home to Missouri and lived in the house he lived in when he came from Missouri. And he did not get wealthy. He was like Cincinnatus in Roman history. He was a citizen who did public duty, not to get rich, but because it was the right thing to do. George Washington went back to farming. He wasn't seeking to become rich. It was not a concept then of civil service and civil duty. The idea was you did that as a duty, not to benefit from it. Today, it's a sinecure. You get elected into an office with power in Washington, and you suddenly, if you get elevated and play the game, go along with the leaders of the parties, and don't vote the way the lobbyists wanted to vote you'll get rich. If you don't, you won't last very long.
John Thune, who's the majority leader in the Senate, I think a Rhino Republican, or he's trying not to be, I don't know. But he's telling Trump, oh, don't lay off, don't have mass layoffs. Why would the mass layoffs help Donald Trump in this cause to destroy voter fraud? Why would
Well,
mass
because
layoffs of government employees work in Donald Trump's favor?
the bureaucracy was packed by Obama with thousands of people who had leftist woke ideologies. And they hired leftist woke workers to do leftist woke regulations like DEI and ESG and every other crazy thing they could think of. Sex change operations for children, teach communism in the schools, get God out of the schools, don't say the Pledge of Allegiance, and have every one of the agencies have so many regulations that, you a climate change, which was a big scam, and carbon taxes and all the other crazy ideas they came up with. Admirals and generals wearing dresses with lipstick, and every other insane concept of destroying what works. I mean, you can always judge a democratic idea because it won't work. We should use wind and solar. Well, they're not scalable. Sun doesn't shine all the time. Wind doesn't blow all the time. You have to store them in batteries, energy in batteries. Hydrocarbon fuels are much more efficient. I wrote a book on that. Truth about energy, climate change, and global warming. And
So, go ahead.
Yes, no, go. The
So
climate
the
scam,
laying off
climate
the
scams. Yeah. So laying off these people in massive numbers is the only way you can get control of unelected people making rules that are their preference. And most law today comes out of the Federal Register, where the Congress gives a direction, and then the bureaucrats promulgate the rules, and the rules become the laws. Well, the rules were never voted on in Congress. But that's where they set up the environmental rules. They set up all kinds of, control every aspect of our lives through the bureaucracy. If we get rid of the bureaucracy, throw it away. I remember when I was a kid, my mother probably had a rule book, and one day my brother, who was younger than me, he was probably only about 3 or 4 years old, threw away the rule book. And I have to think he had an interesting idea. But I think if we get rid of all these bureaucrats, we can throw away their rule books.
And you think that there'll be tens of thousands, maybe a million or so of them, of this mass layoff, mass firings of these people?
Well, I don't know how many Trump is actually going to succeed in getting rid of. I mean, there's probably 800,000 yet in the bureaucracy at least. And Obama swelled the numbers greatly. Today, I believe there was a start in the reduction in force, and each of the departments have been instructed by Trump to prepare reduction in force orders. So it's going to happen, but it's only going to be a matter of time till it happens in a big way, but it's going to happen.
Wow.
And so I don't know how many will be fired, but since I have no use for virtually any of them, I'll be happy. We'll start with the IRS, get rid of it. Yeah, get rid of the Federal Reserve. We don't need either one of them. They're not in the Constitution. And go back to tariffs, which Trump is doing. So, the second term of Donald Trump is one in which we're getting back to some sanity. And these screaming demons of the Democratic Party screeching through the streets are going to be exposed for what they are. And Donald Trump is firm enough to say, if it takes the military, we'll have a free election, an election which we know citizens voted. And I do think that the race-based gerrymandering is going to be addressed. John Roberts has said enough to indicate it's coming. And his court, which has already done away with race preferences in hiring and race preferences in admissions to schools, is going to do away with race preferences in redistricting.
So this redistricting out in California, where they're going to try to load up so there'll be no Republican districts for Congress out in California, you think that's not going to work out? That's going to be challenged?
I think it's going to be challenged. I think the entire scheme is unconstitutional.
Wow. Is it going to get more violent? I mean, it seems to me they're not going to go quietly into the night. And this is what Larry Klayman, brilliant guy, says. He said this a while ago. So when they start losing in court, and they will, and they have, he says now you're going to see the violence ramp up. And sure enough,
Well, it's already gotten more violent.
and you
The
think it's going to get
Democrats,
more violent from here on out. But tell me what you
yes.
think it's going to look, what it's going to look like. Is it going to be more violent?
Well, certainly in places like Portland, Oregon, and I lived in Portland, Oregon for several years. It was a beautiful city, but it was far left. It was out there. It seemed like it was so distant from the heartland of the United States, and it attracted a lot of the old hippies and yippies and drug culture, and it had its own subculture, which eventually took over the city. And yes, you'll have more Antifa violence, and you'll have more leftist violence. I think the threat of Charlie Kirk's assassination should be an eye-opener and wake-up call. A lot of active politicians and people who are speaking out against these demons are going to be targeted. But the point is that I think that I've always said in the end, God always wins. Satan doesn't win this battle. And so therefore, I believe that we're going to see Donald Trump take appropriate and measured steps, but he will ultimately control the cities, and he will ultimately deport the illegal immigrants, and they ultimately will begin self-deporting in greater numbers. And organizations which have been funded to destroy America, Southern Poverty Law Center is another one, and have committed crimes. These are not going to be charged with hate speech, but they're going to be examined as to where their funding came from, and whether those dollars were money laundered or legitimate.
Oh,
and this
boy, this is going to get nasty. This is going to get nasty. Ho, this is going to get Rico. This is going to get. There are going to be people in cuffs that think they would never be arrested.
Well, it's I think I went through it personally with the Mueller investigation. They thought I had a tie to Julian Assange, and I was the last person they brought in the Mueller investigation. The FBI knocked on my door in August of 2018, brought me before the Mueller grand jury. They thought I was the tie to the Russian collusion. I mean, in 2016, we had taken a trip to Italy, and the plane figured out Assange had Podesta's emails. When I got to Milan, I wrote Roger Stone an email and said, word is that Podesta's got, and I had no source, but I made it sound like I did, but I knew that it was right, because I knew Podesta and I knew what was in those emails. I knew the Russians didn't steal them. I knew Seth Rich stole them. It was an inside job from a kid who worked for the Democratic National Committee, who liked Bernie Sanders and thought Bernie Sanders was getting a raw deal from Hillary Clinton and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who were conspiring to make sure Bernie Sanders didn't win the Democratic National Convention's presidential nominee in 2016.
No, he didn't.
And he did. And Assange released the first batch of emails on the day the Democratic National Convention opened in 2016, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz resigned, and the Bernie Sanders delegates walked out. And so Hillary Clinton had a mutiny in her hands, not a coronation. And then Assange said he had more emails, and he was going to release them later. Well, I figured out they were Assange's, and Podesta's. I told that to Roger Stone. So they finally, after months and hours of interrogation, the Mueller investigation said they were going to charge me with lying before a jury in Washington that would hate me, and I go to prison the rest of my life. Or I could take a plea deal, say I did lie about having a link to Assange, and that I was just trying to protect Donald Trump and Roger Stone, and they go light on me. Well, I prayed on that and thought about it, and the day after Thanksgiving in 2018, I went public and said, I'm not taking their plea deal. We're not going to go before a judge and God and swear to a lie to stay out of prison. They can just put me in prison for the rest of my life, and I'll get ready to go. But the point is that they didn't
go to
indict
prison.
me. They didn't indict me.
Ha.
Instead, they lied and they closed down the Mueller investigation.
Yeah.
But I know how evil these people are, and I know how truth means nothing to them. I know how the Justice Department was weaponized, and I know where we're headed as a nation. And we were within, one election with having lost this country if Kamala Harris had been elected president. The election was stolen by Biden. And I do have a hard
one
break
last
coming
question.
up.
So, two things. One last question. Your prediction: the military likely is going to be involved to make sure that the 2026 election is going to be done fairly. Is that correct? Will you just give me a quick couple of sentences on that? Will the military be involved in the 2026 election to make sure it's done correctly?
Most likely, yes. And the military, I think, is likely to prepare for it, because if the state boards of election do not clean up their voter files and get the algorithms out of them, if they are planning to do general mail-in balloting, it's not going to be allowed, because those are the ways they steal elections.
And last thing, I want you to talk about God's Five Stones, because you're doing great work on this. And God's Five Stones is your website. Lots of free information on it. And it's also a tax-deductible donation. You take donations. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, and it's GODS, no apostrophe. You spell out the word five, F-I-V-E, and stones is plural. So gods5stones.com. It's a reference to David picking up the right 5 smooth stones from a creek to go after Goliath. They picked up the right stones.
And so we know Goliath fell in that that not so great. It wasn't a long battle. It was just a kid with a slingshot that knocked down a 9-foot tall giant. So all this will be in after the interview section, gods5stones.com. I'll put that in there. I'll put here's the donation page. Oh, Jerome Corsi, hope you come back and give us an update, see how things are progressing. Jerome Corsi, thank you for joining us today on